the village green of the Tower of London. Unlike most village greens in this country, where you might find swings or slides for kids to play on, possibly a cricket pitch for us to practice whooping the Aussies, we've got something quite unique here, our very own execution site. There it is, that glass coffee table with a stupid pillow on it, really is where people died. Anyone like modern art? Awful, isn't it? The only way they'll get rid of that is if you complain. That is not to be confused with the public scaffold up there on Tower Hill. Only 6 people were executed here, 3 of them Queens of England. But before I tell you about them, told you I spit, I'll describe some of the buildings which surround us here on Tower Green. The first most obvious one is that one there, the White Tower. That is the Tower of London. Remember, William the Conqueror had it built. He instructed a man called Gundulf of Beck. Gundulf, kids, not Gandalf, okay? This man was not a wizard, he was an architect. He was the Bishop of Rochester. He built that, as I say, in 1078, took 20 years. So those who are good at maths, it was finished in 1098. It took him so long for 2 reasons. It's very big, and he also had to bring the stone all the way over from France. It's made of Caen stone and some Kentish ragstone thrown in there as well. It's 92 feet tall. The walls taper in thickness from 15 feet at the bottom to 11 at the top. On each corner you'll see a turret, 3 are square, 1 is round, and it's in the round turret just over there that the first Royal Observatory was established. Remember, that got moved down to Greenwich in the 17th century. On top of each turret you'll see a crown in gold leaf, beneath which is a weather vane. These denote that this is still a royal palace. This is still a royal palace to this day, although no longer a royal residence. Who didn't know that this was a royal palace? 7 times I've said it in this tour so far. If you were in Buckingham Palace right now, you would be in no more of a royal palace than the one you're now standing in, and that is a very, very important thing to remember when you're walking around here, okay? All of our kings and queens lived in that building for nearly 600 years. The last monarch to do so was King James I, who left here in 1603. The royal family lived on the top floor. The floors below was a council chamber, banqueting hall, accommodation for knights and their ladies, and it was also occupied by servants and retainers. There is, of course, one more floor partly below the ground. Now, in those days, remember, the Thames was much closer to that building in those days. This made it cold, dark and damp. That made it the perfect place to keep the wine. Kept the wine down there, it was a wine cellar. Now, I asked that question a few weeks ago and someone responded, cheese and other dairy products. I love that. But no, it was indeed where the wine was kept. Now, the first prisoner held here was a man called Ranulph Flambard. This was in the year 1100, just 2 years after that building was completed. Ranulph Flambard was a Frenchman, and he was also a bishop. Somebody thought it was a great idea to lock a French bishop in a wine cellar. It proved to be disastrous. It took him 6 months, but he slowly drank his way through that cellar. He got himself and us, his guards, very drunk, and he escaped. The very first person held prisoner here was the very first person to escape. It wasn't the last. 31 people have escaped from the Tower of London throughout history, but it might surprise you to learn. But you're absolutely right, it was then used as a dungeon torture chamber. We all heard of Guy Fawkes? Some of you have, some of you haven't. Guy Fawkes famously tried to blow up the House of Parliament in November of 1605. He was captured, taken down there, and he was stretched on the rack. When he was 6 inches taller, he finally confessed to his crimes, and he was executed in January of 1606. And today it's brightly lit, very little trace of its former use remains, but you can hear cries of agony in there. It is a gift shop. And have a look at the prices, it will make you want to scream, it really will. Right, to get in the White Tower, excuse me, you've got those stairs just over there. Inside there is Henry VIII's famous armour, the one with the massive codpiece. Lots of other famous suits of armour in there, line of kings, lots of guns, knives, bows and arrows, swords and bayonets, something for the gentlemen. And there's some execution paraphernalia on the top floor, so it's really good, the kids will love it in there. Please take them in there to see it. Right, down there you'll see the entrance to the bloody town, and just to its right you can see a lot of scaffolding, and from the scaffolding is emerging that beautiful Tudor building. That is called the Queen's House. It's called the Queen's House because it's the Queen's house. This is a royal palace, that's her house inside it. It is a Tudor building, dates from 1538, and it is the best preserved, indeed it's the only surviving timber frame Tudor building in London. All the others were destroyed by the fire, or the Great Fire, of 1666. That's the home of General the Lord Dannet. He's the 159th Constable of the Tower, and being the residence of such a high-ranking individual, it's often been used to house notable personalities. Queen Catherine Howard spent her last nights in there before her execution in 1542. Anyone from Pennsylvania? Hello, Pennsylvania people. William Penn was held in that house for 8 months for his offensive writings against King Charles II. They had a difference of opinion about what constituted religion. While he was in there, he penned a document called No Cross, No Crown, which made the king even crosser and more inclined to keep him in there. William Penn was only saved by his father, Admiral William Penn, who was owed a favour by the king. He called this in, and the king agreed to release the son on condition that he left the country. He did so. He crossed the Atlantic to found the Quaker colony of Pennsylvania, named in honour of his father. Pennsylvania, I have absolutely no doubt, is a great state of the United States, or Commonwealth, I believe you guys call it, but it's named after a criminal. One of the last people held in that house was a man called Rudolf Hess. Rudolf Hess was the deputy leader of the Nazi Party in Germany, and he spent 3 days in that house in May of 1941 before being taken to Wales for his own safety. But that's a bit weird, taking the deputy leader of the Nazi Party away for his own safety. What some of you may not realise is that during the years 1940 to 41, this great city suffered what became known as the Blitz. Every night for 18 months, thousands of tons of bombs would rain down on this great city. Just over there is the East End of London. Almost 60% of that part of London was completely destroyed. 35,000 people were killed during the Blitz, and almost 85,000 people were very seriously wounded. 11 high explosive bombs and 1,000 incendiary devices landed within these walls, so it was a very dangerous place to be indeed. After the war, he was taken to Nuremberg, tried and convicted and sentenced to life in prison, which he was to serve in Spandau prison, Berlin, where he died in an unrepentant Nazi, by all accounts, in 1987. Where's the Americans? Put your hands up. Okay, I recognise there's a little flicker of confusion on your faces, because I just said the war was on in 1940 and 41. I realise in your history books it teaches you it started a little bit later than that, but for everybody else it started in 1939. If I'm honest, we probably needed your help, and it's been the source of endless films, hasn't it, about how you won the war for everybody else. Thank you very much indeed. And if you'd have paid your taxes, by the way, all this history would have been yours, wouldn't it? Right, the buildings on either side of the Queen's House, ones with the blue doors, they date from a slightly later period, and they now serve as accommodation for some of my Yeoman Warder colleagues and their families. This really is our home. Just to the right there, you see the tower, it's called the Beecham Tower. That used to be the state prison. Inside there are 91 inscriptions carved by the prisoners. Some of these date back more than 450 years, and they're not just Eric was here, they're really, really nice graffiti, so please go and have a look at those. Next door to that is the doctor's house. This is a community, so we have a doctor. If that man can't help you, hopefully the man next door can, because this is where our vicar lives, just here. This is his office, the Chapel Royal of St. Peter ad Vincula, and we'll be going in there shortly to conclude our tour. Just over there behind you is the Waterloo block. Now this is named after Wellington's famous victory over the French. It's just part of my thing, I have to do it, sorry, French people. After Wellington's victory over the French! On the 18th of June 1815, the cannons that are outside the Waterloo block there are captured French cannons from that battle. It was built in 1845 as a barracks for 1,000 soldiers of Wellington's garrison. Nowadays though, that is where the crown jewels are kept. There is 11.5 tons of gold in there and 23,000 diamonds, rubies, emeralds and God knows what. The two largest cut diamonds in the world are inside that building, one of which is 530.2 carats. They are massive and very, very beautiful indeed. And yes, they're all real. Okay, get sick of reading on TripAdvisor, well, the crown jewels are all right, but they're not the real ones. Oh yes, they are. Where's the Brits? Put your hands up, Brits. What happened in Houses of Parliament about 5 weeks ago? I'll give you a clue, it was the state opening of Parliament. What was on the Queen's head at the state opening of Parliament? I'll give you another clue, the state crown, exactly. If you'd have come here on the day of the state opening of Parliament, what wasn't in that building? Why? It's on the Queen's head, because they're the real crown jewels. They are the real crown jewels. Otherwise, why would we put two soldiers outside? And yes, they're real soldiers. They're not people dressed up pretending to be soldiers. They are real British soldiers. The thing in his hand is a real gun. The things inside that gun are real bullets. And if you jump over that fence, you'll find out how sharp that thing is on the end of his rifle. Okay? They are real British soldiers. Please give them the respect that they deserve. Okay? They do not deserve to be twerked at. And various other things that we see happening to them. Okay? So please treat them with respect that you would expect your own soldiers to be treated with. To get inside the crown jewels, you'll see a black and gold clock through which, or just coming out of there, there's a queue. Join the end of the queue, go in there, and that's where the crown jewels are. Underneath that black and gold clock is a black door through which are the crown jewels. The crown jewels are through a door which is beneath that black and gold clock. Everybody have a look at that signpost just behind you. What does it say on the left-hand side of the signpost? Anybody not know where the crown jewels are? Don't bother saying it, don't bother. Fantastic. Right then, well, let's turn our attention back to this horrific sight. Just there, not you guys. Remember, only 6 people lost their lives here, 3 of them Queens of England. Now, the first victim was on the 19th of May 1536. This was Queen Anne Boleyn. Anne was tried, convicted and sentenced to die for incest, adultery and witchcraft, amongst other things. Make of those accusations what you will. She was actually tried in a building which stood over there where those arches now stand, but obviously long since gone. Now Anne didn't want to be executed by the block and actually feared this greatly. It didn't always go very well. And so she elected to die in the French manner, which in those days was with a two-handed double